Like, I don't think I've ever been more grateful to be alive than in that moment. Not even from when I landed skydiving. That moment, I was so fucking happy just to be alive and nothing else mattered. Nothing else mattered. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a solo episode of the AUXORO Podcast. It has been years since I've recorded a solo episode on the AUXORO Podcast. Normally, I save these for the AUX, which is the typical solo podcast platform. I have a show called the AUX where I just do unexpert rants on articles, news, experiences, whatever, once a week. So if you want more solo rants, you can head over there. But for the AUXORO Podcast, as you know, is more guest conversations, and I was feeling like I wanted to do some sort of recap for 2022 to start 2023 for the AUXORO Podcast. And I thought solo form would be the best. I was thinking about having my brothers on to do a 2022 recap, but I'm going to do another episode with them later. And I'll do the solo recap now. So I wrote down some things I want to talk about. These are just things that, it's not, I'm not going to turn this into like a how-to or a, this is how, what I've learned last year, so this has to apply to everyone. I don't think like that. I think that this is just for me personally. And if you hear something that you want, you can always take that and run with it. If you think it's stupid, that's fine too. Everything means nothing. I know nothing. This is all just an experiment. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is creativity. Creativity. I split up these, quote unquote lessons into 3 different sections for 2022. So creativity, love, and life. So the first section, creativity, there is a quote that I had written down on my whiteboard for the entire last year of 2022, which is a quote from an author, Gene Wolfe. And Gene Wolfe says, "You never learn how to write a novel. You only learn how to write the novel that you're on." You never learn how to write a novel. You only learn how to write the novel that you're on. And I adapted that for podcasting. So on my board, I had written out, "You never learn how to record a podcast. You only learn how to record the podcast that you're on." And I would revisit this. This was like my anchor. I was going back to this constantly because I would record, especially guest conversations. I would prepare for a guest and I would have my notes in a certain way. I would have it organized in, the way that I do it, and the note-taking process, the notes that I'll actually have in front of me for a guest podcast has evolved over the years. But every time I record a great podcast, I look at my notes and my preparation and I go, like, that is it. I need to keep this for the rest of time because I've found the formula. This is the thing that works. And then I have a podcast maybe, 4 or 5 weeks later where I'm like, that kind of felt awkward, but I'm using the notes that went well 5 weeks before. Why isn't this working? Why isn't my formula working? And when I came across this quote by Gene Wolfe, a light bulb went off in my head. And I was literally like, like, it doesn't matter about the past or the future. What matters is that you're doing the thing that works for this particular episode or this particular guest or this particular novel or this particular, financial extrapolation or prediction, whatever it is that your creative pursuit is. Everything is individual, and the way that you get better creatively is by growing and adapting. So it feels so good as a creator to hone in on the thing that worked and lock yourself into that creative pattern because it's less scary. it's like a safety net of I've found the formula of how to record a podcast. And so I don't need to do any more work. I don't need to question that. I don't need to grow that. I don't need to take away from that. This is just what I have moving forward. And then when you build that identity up in your mind, then when something rocks you, like when you just you run into an episode and you're like, that didn't go how I thought it was going to go. And you're so tied to this identity of I've found the way, it can fuck with you. And so, you never learn how to record a podcast. You only learn how to record the podcast that you're on. I try to go back to that as much as possible because every episode is different. And I'll tell myself like, yeah, that went well. Or maybe that episode didn't go as well as I wanted to. And also, the next time is going to be totally different. I'm going to be open to changing things about it. There is no exact set in stone way to create something. And it was such a release. It's scary and peaceful at the same time. It's scary because there's no safety net of going back to just like the same thing that you did over and over again. But it's peaceful because you're like, oh, no one knows how to do this. No one knows how the best way to record a podcast for you. If someone tries to sell you something like this is the best way to record a podcast, no one fucking knows. It's all bullshit. I believe it's valuable to take insight from other podcasters. There are other podcasters that I look up to, like Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, and I take things from them that they do and I apply it to me. But there are also other things that they do that have nothing to do with me and will never work for me because we're not the same people. We have different brains. We have different patterns of speaking. We have different preparation processes. We look at things differently. And that individuality is what makes people go to one podcast over another. So if you try to make yourself into something you're not, you're selling yourself short and you're robbing your audience of you. So if anyone's ever telling you, if it's coming from the top down and someone's like, I know how to record a podcast, this is the perfect podcast formula, that's the shit that worked for them. And now they're trying to take advantage of smaller podcasters who are searching for an answer. And maybe they haven't done it long enough to know that there is no answer. And that's kind of the meaning behind this quote, that there's only the answer for right now, the thing that you're on. But beyond that, no one knows, including you, until you start to prepare for that next episode or for whatever that next thing is. Like trying to find the perfect podcast formula is like trying to train the wind. Trying to find the perfect podcast formula is like trying to train the wind. Like imagine you go outside. You go on the side. I'm in Brooklyn, so I walk outside. I go onto the sidewalk. And there's a lot of crazy shit that you see in Brooklyn and New York City. And you see a guy and he's just like yelling into the air, like, stop, 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 or go, go, go. Or come here, and for some reason you go up to the guy, which, on my experience, if you've been living in New York City for more than 3 minutes, to never go up to someone that's just yelling into the air. I saw a guy shadow boxing on the subway yesterday. I literally had to go through the platform dodging this guy punching into the air. And I've been in the city for 4 years now, so that's just normal to me. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go the other direction. I'm just going to time this dude's punches so I can like go underneath it quick to get to where I'm going because I don't want to take the long way around. But if you see someone outside yelling at the air, you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, just say you went up to him and you're like, what are you doing? And the guy looks at you and he says, I'm trying to train the wind. And you're like, dude, you can't train the wind. It's out of control. It's a force. No matter how much you yell, stop or go or fucking, sit boy, sit wind. It's something that's totally out of your control. It's a force, literal force of nature. And it would be so stupid to do that. If I went outside and was trying to teach the wind how to function or blow or whatever, it would be the most insane, imbecile pursuit ever, and people would rightly think I was an idiot. And in a way, that's what it's like to feel. That's what it's like to think that you found the way to create, like, the way, because there's so much that's out of your control in creativity. Like, just the things that you come across that inspire you, the thoughts that come into your head that you have no control over, the way that a creation like a painting, it kind of comes together in ways that you couldn't have imagined when you started. There's so many elements out of your control that are forces of nature, forces of experience, forces of biology, that it would be, to me, it is as idiotic as trying to train the wind, as trying to, like, train your creativity to stay a certain way. You're like, stay like this, keep being good. It's like, no, everything grows and adapts. And I didn't realize that at the beginning of my podcasting journey, because I was trying to, like, train everything to go exactly how I wanted to. I would, like, just like you train a dog, I'd be like, this has to be like this and this has to be like this. Listen, like, why isn't this thing doing what I say it's doing? Why isn't this working? Getting so frustrated. And now, almost 5 years into it, I'm like, yeah, that was stupid. It's like yelling into the fucking air, expecting the world to adapt to you when you just have to flow. When you just have to flow with the world. And the creative process adapts. The creative process, it changes all the time. And the thing that gets that bite for an episode, the thing that gets that bite for a painting or a book, like the hook, the thing that hooks people in, that changes every time. It's like, imagine you are sleeping with someone, you're going at it, you're doing the four-leg wiggle, there's just bodies cased together, and you're having yourself a good time, and you're with your lady. Maybe it's a girlfriend, maybe it's a one-night stand. What is it called? The horizontal shuffle. Maybe you're doing a little horizontal shuffling back and forth. Maybe you're getting a little vertical in the shower, and things are going well, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do my move now. And then you do your move, maybe you're hitting it from the back and you're reaching around a little bit. You're adding in some spices, some garnish with the fingers, and she gets off, she comes, you come, and you think in your mind, you're like, oh my God, like, I've unlocked the female orgasm. I have found the formula. I have made this girl come. So therefore, I now have the power to make every other female on the planet experience an orgasm. And then you go into the rest of your sexual interactions, and, maybe it works a couple more times, but then you realize that, every person is different for what brings them pleasure or makes them feel good. And you'll quickly learn that does not work for most people. Maybe that worked for her, but that doesn't mean that you just have, like, a now fill in the blank orgasm formula for the rest of your sexual interactions. It's like that's kind of the way that I feel when I try to apply that to creativity. Like it's just because I got that climax for one episode where I'm like, oh my God, like, that was amazing. It doesn't mean it's going to happen the same exact way. It's never going to happen the same exact way ever again. It's like a snowflake. Orgasms are like snowflakes. That's going to be the title of my self-help sex book. Orgasms are like snowflakes, folks. If just because you make one come doesn't mean you'll make them all come. Even though snowflakes don't come, they melt. But applying cold to a sexual interaction, having ice in your mouth, those could be pretty good ways to unlock the orgasm. But again, just because one person likes temperature changes doesn't mean the other person's going to like temperature change, but you can play around with it, see how it works. You know, anyone, and again, anyone telling you like how to do something, how to, like, this is the way, especially people who have had success and are now trying to retroactively decipher that success in ways that probably aren't true, or there's just much more happening that this person isn't telling you, like luck or connections or whatever it is. A lot of times people get success and then they'll paint a story in their mind of their success that didn't actually happen, but like someone came to them and is like, we want you to write a book, or we want you to, you know, make a master class or whatever. And so this person's like, okay, I guess now I have to like give people a formula of how I got successful because I'm selling something. And oftentimes a lot of that shit is bullshit. It's made up. It's you're not taking into account the luck or the connections or just the sheer chaos of the universe coming together at a certain moment of time that applies to no one else besides that person. So like, I'm not shitting on the self-help industry or like the people releasing, you know, like how to do this. Like I've done that myself in the past. I got away from it just because I thought it was boring. I thought it was much more interesting to talk to people and talk about other things, talk about things in different ways. But like a lot of it is, I do believe a lot of the people saying like, this is the way, genuinely believe that they are doing good. They genuinely believe that like I'm releasing something that's going to help a lot of people, and maybe it does. But also the thing that they leave out is that it's so personal. It's for me. You know, it's like how to record a podcast in parentheses should be that's worked for me. It's not just how to record a podcast or how to paint, how to hit a ball 500 feet. It's just like for, in parentheses, everything. When you see like a how-to in your head, this is what I do. I'll put like a parentheses. I'll just be like, you know, how to hit a ball 500 feet. And I'll think, well, for that person, in parentheses, for whoever, because there's many different ways to do that thing. There are certain through lines to it, but there's a lot of overlap. It's like, it's so different. It's like, me telling you how to record a podcast would be like a pilot, or it would be like a barista telling a pilot how to fly a plane. Like you wouldn't get past the first 5 sentences because the pilot would be like, wait, what do you do? And the barista would be like, well, I make coffee. And the pilot's like, well, you're telling me how to land a commercial jetliner? And the barista like, yeah, I've done a flight simulator. I've seen it on TV. I've watched Sully. I'll fucking land it in the Hudson, dude. Throw the wheels down right now over the Hudson. I'll fucking bring us in. And the pilot's just like, all right, dude, and just walks away. That is almost, that's a ridiculous comparison, obviously, but like that is how you have to think. And watch, I'm telling you like how you have to think. This is how I think, where it's like if someone's telling me how to do something, it's 2 completely different things. Even if you're a podcaster and I'm a podcaster, it's so different when I tell you, if I told you this is how to record a podcast, it's like apples to oranges, pilots to baristas, because it's podcasting, there's so many different elements that are out of both of our control. So many different things coming together that it makes 0 sense for me to tell you how to do something. Now, if I say this is what's worked for me, then that sets it up as more of a, this has worked for me, this is how I've done things, but, take from this what you will. And I appreciate people who give insight like that. Like I have a good friend, Chris Cooper. He's been on the podcast, and I am in the middle of writing a short story. I've written it. I'm in the process of editing it. And Chris is one of the best writers I've ever come across. I've spoken to him on the podcast twice. I love his writing. I actually published one of his stories on AUXORO.com called Memorandum on Mortality. So check that out. Shout out to Chris Cooper. And I asked him advice about writing the short story. I sent it to him. It was like 17 pages. He didn't have to read it. And he got back to me. And the way he was giving me insights, he was telling me, and he didn't have to do this. I would have listened to him regardless, but he was like, "Hey, just so you know, the shit I'm telling you, don't follow it if it doesn't feel right. This is just what's worked for me, or this is like what people do in the industry or when they're writing these types of stories. But if it doesn't feel good, then don't fucking do it. Just like, write the story how you want." And I really appreciated that because he has so much more experience writing than me. He's such a better writer that if he told me to do something, I would have been like, "Oh, I have to do this now," because he's the one with the experience. But he was like, "No, I'm telling you these things not as a how-to. I'm just telling you these things that may work for you. They may not work for you, but this is just like the thoughts that were popping into my head during the reading of the story. You may want to change it. You may not want to change it, but like." At the end of the day, it's your story, so you have to write it how you see fit and how you see it best. And I really appreciated that because that made me feel more secure as a creator. Because as I'm going through his suggestions and as I'm tweaking the story in the back of my mind, I know that there is no creative God. Even if Chris is, in a sense, the writing God to me because he's so good at what he does. He's like, no, fuck that. Like, there's no pedestal. Write what you want to write your own shit and be confident in it. I'm just merely, it's like passing road signs on the side of the highway. You don't have to stop and get off at every exit. But if some exit, you're like, oh shit, I want to do that, slow down and get off and see what that's about. But you can just look at something and be like, no, that's not for me. I'm not going there. Or maybe take a detour and check it out. So yeah, that's my creativity rant. Let's get into love. So the creativity was the point of all that. I was trying to tie it together, and the theme for creativity was there is no formula. So I hope that made some sort of sense. Like, getting rid of the formulaic version of creativity in my mind has really helped me in 2022. The theme for the love section, what I hope to convey, is the most important thing is showing up for your friends and for your loved ones. And I learned that, and I had that reinforced in my life throughout 2022. And I was fortunate enough and I was grateful enough to officiate my best friend's wedding. And that was one of the most gratifying, surreal experiences. I got to be creative. I got to write some of the officiation dialogue. It was actually pretty tough, like trying to write for other people, because I'm so used to writing out things for podcasts or solo podcasts or just writing a story. But like having in mind that this is someone's special day and that this is not about me, this is not about just like me and a guest or like just my own creative selfishness and trying to make it something that is going to be a great memory for the rest of my best friend John's life and his now wife, Emily. Like when they look back on it, I wanted them to, feel like it was good. And so I probably wrote maybe 250, 300 words as part of the officiation, maybe like 300 to 500 words, which is not that much. It's like less than a page in total. And I did the officiation with Emily's dad, so the wife's father, we kind of tagged teamed the officiation. And when I was writing it, like a page took me probably like 2 weeks going back and forth with John and Emily and Emily's dad, and it was so, like, I was so nerve-wracked writing it. I was grateful to be writing it, and it was fun, but I was also just harping over every single word in a way that I hadn't done before. So to me, that experience was surreal, because I was thinking, this is not just words. This is going to curate someone's special day, like the thing they're going to remember for the rest of their life. And shout out to Emily's dad too, because he really helped me. He had officiated a few weddings before, and so it really came together, and with his experience, and it was a really good time. It was one of the funnest things I've done. It was I was more nervous doing that than any other podcast or public speaking thing, just because of the weight of fucking it up. And I felt that for maybe like the first minute or so when I started the officiation. But then after that, I felt like I was so in the moment, and I was talking to just John and Emily, the husband and wife, the main characters that day. Because if you're officiating, the husband and wife, future husband and wife, the bride and groom are right in front of you, and then the audience, the family members, I'm saying like audience, like I'm podcasting, like I'm using the day as a way to create content, like I'm just live streaming the podcast, I'm live streaming the officiation, I'm trying to like get in riffs and rants, I'm like asking people, doing crowd work with the audience, bringing guests up and trying to talk to them. That's how fucked up my brain is as a creator, where like I talk about my loved ones as an audience. I'm like, let me test this topic out on them. And my friend's just like, how about you officiate my wedding, the most important day of my life? And I'm like, yeah, we'll get to that. But like, your uncle had a really good story from the dinner the night before. I want to bring him up here. We'll really get into that, ask him some questions back and forth, just as like a warm up for the officiation. But no, it was the most in the moment I've ever felt for any sort of like public speaking, anything like that, because after a minute or so, I was basically just talking to John and Emily. I was looking out at the audience, so people. And I'm saying, I guess, yeah, it was an audience, but it's, family members, cousins, relatives, whoever, friends. But it felt like I was just talking to them. And I would look at them, and that relaxed me immediately. So, if I was to give any insight for officiating a wedding, and again, this is not like a how-to thing, but the thing that worked for me is just do it like you're gonna talk to your friends. And if you're officiating a wedding for your friends, chances are that you have a really good connection with them, and that it's gonna feel natural, and you're close to them on the podium, and it really does feel like you're looking back and forth, and the people in the crowd can't really tell that you're looking at them. It just looks like you're kind of looking out. So that worked out well too. And it was really fun. It was it might have been the funniest thing I've ever done. Not funniest, but most fun thing I've done. I've already said that. But if you're on the edge of whether or not to officiate a wedding and you've been offered it, I'm telling you, I podcast for a living. I'm used to speaking to people and, going for hours and hours and hours. And it's way different from having a crowd in front of you. But still, like, because of podcasting, a lot of things in that vein don't really freak me out. And I'm telling you, I was so nervous before, and it also ended up being one of the best things I've ever done. It was so cool to be a part of that day as an officiator, as a friend, kind of in both of those roles. And then once the officiating is done, it's like a big release, and then you go get fucked up, you have fun, you drink 17 vodka sodas, and that's that. You dance your ass off. But yeah, if you're on the edge, if you have the opportunity to do it, and you're feeling like, I'm going to fuck this up, or, I'm really nervous. I felt all that too. And it ended up being so fucking fun. So even if you don't think you're the one to do it, I would say if you have the opportunity, think really hard before turning it down, because I suspect that it will also be one of the best experiences you've had. If you put a little bit of work into it, maybe you have someone else officiating with you. Maybe you're doing it by yourself, which I imagine would be more nerve-wracking, but still, it was great. I will say the biggest fear I had leading up to the officiation was, what if I pop a boner while I'm officiating? Like, what if I'm reading, we're all gathered here today to celebrate the union of John and Emily, and we're here for this sacred moment. And as I'm saying that, this just rod in my pants, this 5.4 inch rod in my pants just starts hardening and going up, and my pants just become a tent. And as I'm talking about like a loving, special moment, I'm just torqued, just hard as a rock. Like, for whatever reason, like, I normally like when I'm podcasting, I've talked about wild things in podcasts, like sex or like sexual moments, whatever, and I've not gotten an erection during that. But for some reason in the back of my mind, I would be writing the officiation and I would think about something and be like, oh my God, what if I get hard as a rock during this? Like, how, and what would I do to diffuse that? Like, do you address it? Do you look down at the situation, and you're like, folks, when there's love in the air, the blood starts rushing, and that's that, and I'm not going to apologize. And then you just go on with the officiation. Do you just ignore it? Do you just start saying, and now the vows, and as you're just standing there just with your hands over your dick and balls, just sweating, red in the face, not addressing it at all? That is legitimately, besides the nerves, the only thing that ever ran through my mind. Like, what if I just get hard as a rock during the officiation? What would I say? How do I diffuse that? Do I jerk off in the bathroom 5 minutes before the officiation? Like, instead of taking in the moment, I'm taking myself into the men's bathroom and just whacking off to, whatever I could find on my phone in the moment, just to make sure I don't, ruin the ceremony. Or is it a compliment, Would people, would the crowd be into it? Because they're like, oh my God, this is such a special moment. He has too much blood in his heart that it had to rush downstairs to his penis. There's the officiator is welling up with so much love for this moment, so much love for this ceremony, so much love for these people, that there physically isn't enough room in the chambers of his heart, that it had to flow downwards to the chamber of his cock. I think people would be into it. And I'm just being honest. Like, the number one fear was the nerves, and then the second thing was like, I wasn't even nervous about passing out. I was like, I mean, if I pass out, whatever, like, you just get back up. But I was like, if you just get an erection during a speech, and if you get an erection during an officiation for a wedding ceremony, you need a plan. And I'm not sure what my plan would have been, but I imagine I would have tried to work it in to the officiation somehow. Try to work it in, you know? I'm not sure how I would do that. You're just like, yeah, my ladies and gentlemen, look, I see we have there's a rising of love. There's a rising in my pants. My heart is fuller, and both my heads are getting bigger with the fact you just have to work it out. That's why I love podcasting, because you get the chance to work things out that do work, that don't work, whatever you see. You play around with things, I guess, in the moment. That this is getting weird now. I'm going to be honest. I'm weirding some people out. 74% of the people that were listening to this episode just left. And that's fine, you know? You pop an erection during an officiation, that's on you. There is no formula. See how we tie this back together? There is no formula for boners. You got to figure out what works for you in that moment. I can't come here and tell you what worked for me, because it didn't even happen. I was, maybe a quarter third chubbed, just out of respect for the bride and groom. But if that happens to you, you got to figure it out. Figure it out. I would also say, your friends are your lifeline. Your friends and your loved ones are your lifeline. It's not the money. Definitely not the money. It's not work. It's not your ego. That's what I learned last year. And I was grateful enough to be invited to like 3 or 4 amazing weddings last year. Went to a couple bachelor parties. The things that made me feel best were hanging out with my friends and just like kind of taking in the moment, just being around people that I love being around. There's no replacement for that. Just like being on a bachelor party with 10 guys that you fucking love hanging out with, and you're sitting around, you're drinking, you're ripping cigs, you're going out, and you're just all together, and there's no worries. Everyone's taking an extended weekend, and you're celebrating someone who's about to get married. But like in that weekend, you're like, all you care about is just having fun. There's no work, no money, no whatever. Just let everything go. And those moments, and also the moments with my girlfriend, traveling, I went back home to France to see my girlfriend's parents at the beginning of the year. What else did we do? I mean, we've been to Colombia, we've been to the Netherlands. I'm about to go down to Panama to see her. But like those moments with my girlfriend, with my brothers, hanging out with my brothers, hanging out with my friends, there's no replacement for that. And it nothing comes close. And if I do fuck up in my life, which I hope I have the fortitude not to, but if I did have a regret 70 years from now, and people were like, what do I regret? To me, there's no amount of time where I'm with my friends or I'm with loved ones and I feel full, where I'm like, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm always going to regret the moments that I didn't spend with them. And no matter how many moments I get with the people I love, I'm always going to feel like I need more. So that's why I try to take as many opportunities to do that. So if I do have a regret, it'll just be like not taking in those moments, staying to work for a weekend on podcasting instead of going down to hang out with my friend after a breakup or something, like being there with someone who needs you. Those will be the type of regrets that'll fuck me up the most. But yeah, there's no replacement for that. Nothing comes close to it. And people try. You know, money can feel like a drug after a while. I don't know what that's like personally because I don't make enough of it. But like, look at Jordan Belfort in Wolf of Wall Street. There's that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where Jordan Belfort has made millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. He has fat houses, a smoking hot wife. He has kids. He built this whole business and he was doing shady shit and committing fraud to do it. But there's this moment in the movie where the feds catch up to Jordan Belfort. And before everything gets taken away from him, there's the scene where the feds call his lawyer and they tell, Jordan Belfort's lawyer, and then the lawyer eventually calls Jordan Belfort. But the feds basically say to Jordan Belfort, we got you. If you stop now, you can keep everything. Maybe you go on a little house arrest, but you'll be fine. Like, you just can't do what you're doing anymore. You can't go back to work. You can't, I forget the name of the company, but like you basically have to step down from there. And other than that, you'll get a little slap on the wrist. And he had gotten away with mountains and mountains of deception and fraud at this point. And Jordan Belfort was so fucking mainlined into the money. He was like, nah, I'm good. Like, he got caught red-handed by the feds, and the feds were like, we're letting you go. You just have to stop now. Everything up to this point, yeah, you fucked up, but you'll have to pay a fine, a slap on the wrist, and just stop working. And that's it. You keep your houses, you keep your kids, your wife doesn't leave you, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Just stop. Like, you made enough money for 10 lifetimes. And then Jordan Belfort's like, yeah, no, I'm good. And then he goes back into the office and he's like, I'm not fucking leaving. I'm not fucking leaving. And when I was, 19, when that movie first came out and I'm watching that movie, I'm right there with him, pounding my fucking chest going, I'm like, this guy's a fucking G, dude. Fuck the feds. Fuck them, dude. And now I watch that, I'm like, dude, that was the best deal you could have taken. The feds are literally telling you, you got us. Just pay this fine that's like less than 2% of your net worth. And you just have to stop doing what you're doing. And Jordan Belfort was like, nah, fuck that. And it seemed like a G status move. And now it's just fucking sad and idiotic to think about. And that's like, you're giving up your friends, you're giving up your loved ones, you're giving up, your family, your security for this thing, this money thing, this work thing, this identity that you've built up in yourself. And that's the opposite of showing up for your friends and your loved ones. That's like an extreme example of it, And I said I was going to, or I am going to Panama to live with my girlfriend. So, showing up for loved ones, showing up for the people you love. My girlfriend has showed up for me in ways that, I can't even describe how much she's given up, the sacrifices she's made growing up in France. She's worked all around the world. She's worked in China, Australia. She went to school in the UK. But like, she's been all over the place. And I'm a guy who is rooted in New York. I grew up in Long Island. I moved to Brooklyn. I went to school in Richmond down in Virginia. So like, I've always been around the East Coast, but the majority of my life I've been in New York. And she's the total opposite, but she was willing to, live with me in New York for so long. We've been dating for 2 years at this point. She's probably been in New York for almost half that time. And it's a tough thing to do, being someone that essentially, doesn't have like a set in stone home to make that sacrifice and be in New York. And we spoke about how this is going to work going forward. And she's a scientist, so she is down in Panama right now on an offer to work in a lab there. And I'm going down to Panama for, 2.5 months, close to 3 months to live with her. And it's scary as fuck. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, no, fuck this, dude. Like, I want to stay in New York. This is where I'm comfortable. Like, this is where I have my setup, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But she's made so many sacrifices for me. She's shown up for me. She's been willing to make Brooklyn her home for so long that if I'm going to be a good partner and, be willing to make sacrifices for her, that includes us doing what we have to do to make this work and to be together. So going down to Panama is scary as fuck. I'm excited about it too, but I'm someone who's like so dedicated to my routine that like any shift in that routine freaks me out. I'm like a very routine guy. I write everything down. I mentioned I have whiteboards. I'm addicted to whiteboards, everything planned out. So like uprooting my work, and I'm lucky I can work from anywhere as long as I have Wi-Fi. And Panama's the same time zone as New York. But like uprooting that and, planting that in Panama freaks me out. But like she's been doing this since she was 16. So she's more of an expert in that. But like just, speaking of showing up for the ones you love, if I'm going to truly show up for my girlfriend, I need to find a way to do this. And I know I sound like out of touch complaining about getting to work from Panama. A lot of people don't have that opportunity where they're going back into the office. They have a job that requires them to be there in person. So I know I'm lucky to even have that opportunity. But it is a scary thing to do. I worked abroad for about a month in the Netherlands, a couple years ago with her when she was finishing her degree. That's one of the, 97 places she's been to is she finished her degree in the Netherlands. She finished her PhD there. And I went to go live with her for a month and before we came back to New York. And now it's my turn to, man up and be like, yeah, I'm going to make this sacrifice. I've talked about it. I've been like, yeah, when the time comes, like I'll be willing to go to other places too and make that my home a little bit. And now the time is coming up. And eventually we'll settle down. We'll get a place. She's a scientist, like I said, so she needs a grant for the work. She has to, all that shit has to align. Like there's a lot of things in the science world I don't understand, but a lot of times you'll need a grant. You need an organization to pay for the research that you're doing, to fund it, and then you have to apply for that, and then you have to apply to work at a certain place, and all these cogs in the wheels that are constantly spinning in the science community. And so it's not like you can just easily find a job anywhere. So she got this opportunity in Panama, and so we're going to go down and see what happens. And I'm sure it's going to be a great experience. Part of me, like my podcast wheels started turning when I found out that she was going to be working in Panama. Like I was like, Panama? Like there's drugs in Panama. Like there's drugs in Panama. The cartel's in Panama. What if I worked my way into the cartel and became their exclusive podcast producer? Like, what if and that's insane. I'm not going to do that. But in my brain, I'm like, this is an opportunity here. Like I had to flip it into me going down to Panama to work. I had to flip it from me going down to Panama to work and stay with my girlfriend to like, no, actually, this is a business opportunity. I'm doing this for me. I'm going to work my way into the Panamanian cartel, and I'm going to get in with the head of the cartel, and I'm going to convince this guy like, hey, you know what's great for business? Marketing. You know what helps you market? Having a podcast. Have you ever thought about producing a podcast for your organization? And the guy's like, I mean, we traffic drugs and kill people. Do you think there's an opportunity there? And I'm just like, yeah, dude. True crime is huge in the United States. It's huge. People would love a true cartel podcast. And I'm your guy. I'm going to produce it. I'm going to host it. Or maybe the cartel guy will host it. Maybe be a co-host. Maybe I'll just produce from behind the scenes. So I'm not liable for damages. But I'm going to get inside the drug trade and see what's going on. I'm going to produce this podcast. I think my favorite part of producing or co-hosting a podcast for the cartel would be talking about drugs and murder and then transitioning into ads for BetterHelp. Where I'm talking to like the hired hitman by the cartel, and he's like, yeah, man, I've done a lot of bad shit, dude. I was born. My dad was a cartel member. My dad's dad was a cartel member, and I come from a long line of hitmen. And I killed someone right before this podcast. I beat him to death with a bag full of feathers. And, you might be looking at me right now and thinking, like, why a bag full of feathers? And the reason is, I've put on some weight over the years, and I don't really get a lot of chance to work out. Because my job, I have to follow targets and then I have to execute, literally. So I want to incorporate a workout into the executions. And so it takes a really long time to kill someone with a bag stuffed with feathers. Like hours, like you could suffocate them and then it's over quickly, but like to beat someone with feathers to death, one time, it's 6 days. 6 days. I was just beating this guy with a bag full of feathers. And he was so worn down. At 6 days, he was like, dude, can we stop this? Like, it doesn't even hurt at this point. And I was like, just give it 6 more days. And at that moment, the guy said, I'll kill myself. And he stole my gun and he put a bullet through the roof of his mouth. And I was like, I got exercise out of it. I got exercise, but I don't feel good. I don't feel good. My job doesn't feel good. I don't like being a hitman. I wish there was a way to feel better. And I'm like, Hector, wow, that is a crazy story. You feel better, you say. Have you ever thought about BetterHelp? BetterHelp. Use promo code CARTEL20 to get your first month free. Hector, thank you so much. That would be just like someone just talking to you about sticking a bag of heroin up their ass and trafficking it across the border. And you're like going into an ad about Athletic Greens. You're like, hey, we got to pay the bills somehow. We got to pay the bills somehow. I'm going to take a quick bathroom break, and then we're going to get into the last segment of the podcast, which is life. We've done creativity, we've done love, and we'll end off with life. All right. So for creativity, the theme was there is no formula. For love, the theme is show up for your friends and loved ones. And for life, the theme for life that I learned in 2022 is go after what scares you. Go after what scares you. Now, I spoke about this on the AUX on my solo podcast. So you may have heard this story if you listen to both, but I'll go through it regardless. This was the scariest moment I've had in 2022 and possibly top 3 scariest moments I've had in my life. So going after what scares you. I went backpacking with my girlfriend in the Adirondacks this past summer. And it was for one night. So we brought tents and shit and set up, and it was a 17-mile loop, and it was tough as shit. Tough as shit. I've done tough hikes before. This was the toughest hike I've ever done. And the first day was challenging, but great. We got through it. We set up camp at about the halfway point. And the second day was where things could have went to hell. Literally, I could have been sent to hell, and you'll see why. There is a peak called Saddleback Mountain, and it's in the Adirondacks. And I had no idea about this peak. I'll look at all trails before to see what people say. You know, I will do a little bit of research, but my girlfriend had picked the loop, and I was like, all right, I trust her. You know, we're not going to do any crazy shit. I mean, she does crazy shit, but nothing that's like truly dangerous. And the first peak that we had to climb the next day was Saddleback. And the Saddleback cliffs in particular are fucking psychotic. And before I say this, I just want to acknowledge that I'm a very amateur hiker. You know, I'm in decent shape, but I'm not an avid hiker. I do enjoy going on hikes. I'm not a climber. I'm not an expert by any means. So I know there are a lot of people that have been posting on forums and Reddit and all trails where like Saddleback cliffs are not bad. These people must also be psychotic, like literally delusional, or just expert hikers, because what I'm about to describe to you, it's so nerve-wracking I can't even talk right now. What I'm about to describe to you is, you know, maybe a little exaggeration, because sometimes it's hard not to exaggerate when you're telling a story, but I'll try not to exaggerate as best as I can. And then you can decide what you think. So we're going up the Saddleback cliffs. And so there's this point where we're going up the trail and, you know, we're walking, we're doing a little bit of climbing. And then we get to a point where there's no more walking. You can only climb. There's like an 8-foot, 10-foot boulder. And that's like the first sign of, all right, like this is actual cliffs. Like this is going to be a little difficult to go up. And so I have a 40-pound pack on, maybe 45 with the tent. And then she probably has like a 25, 30-pound pack on. And so keep in mind, we're doing this with basically like a weighted jacket, like a weighted vest, like a full pack on our backs for overnight. We get up the 10-foot boulder. So I basically had to do a pull-up with the 40-pound pack, like stick our feet in. There are a lot of, like, I'm lucky that I've gone bouldering a few times before this, because otherwise I would have had no idea. I didn't have climbing shoes, which didn't help, but like just having some basic knowledge of hooking in my foot and being able to do some maneuvers really helped on the Saddleback cliffs, like just basic stuff. And that was something that kept me from not freaking out in later parts of the story, was just like having knowledge that I've done, V3s, some V4s in the past bouldering, which is like bordering on medium level boulders, not hard. It goes from V1 to V7, V8 or whatever. And so we get up the 10-foot first pass, the first boulder. Like I said, climb up, do a pull up, like do a little bit of bouldering, like put our foot in the crack. And then my girlfriend, a little bit weaker in the upper body. She's a lot weaker in the upper body, but like for a girl, she's I would say probably about average upper body strength. But like with a 30, 40 pound pack on, she couldn't pull herself up all the way. So I had to, grab her and help her get up once she got there. And I want to say she's the much more experienced hiker than me. Like she probably could have gotten up by herself eventually. It just would have taken a little bit longer. But that's also something I was wondering. Like if you're hiking with a pack and you come across this, you have to be able to pull up your body weight to get up this part where we first started the cliffs ascent, the Saddleback Cliffs ascent. So thinking back on it, it's like, how the fuck do you even do, like, because there are a lot of people that can't even do a pull-up, let alone having a pack on their back. And if you're not a climber, like if you're just someone who saw this on all trails and was like, I'll give it a shot, dude, no chance. So we get past that. Then we come to another spot. We walk a little bit and then we get to another spot where, and again, I'm going to try to summarize this without exaggerating. There's like I want to say a 20 to 30 meter stretch where, to me, as I'm doing it, it felt like Alex Honnold shit. Like a very amateur basic version of free soloing. I was a good 10 to 15 meters off the ground, like not vertical, but pretty damn close to vertical, kind of wedged in, holding on, not walking up, but like climbing, pulling myself up this crack. And if I fell, again, it wouldn't have been straight down, but the angle was so severe that most likely I would have broken a leg or at least broken something if I lost my grip. And there's also the possibility that I would have just bounced off this ledge and kept rolling over the mountain and died. That is not an exaggeration. I have a clear picture in my mind after I got up this point, looking down and being like, yeah, wow, I could have died right there. And before I went up, because I was the first one to go up and then my girlfriend, before I went up, I literally told my girlfriend, stand by the ledge, because it was this, 20 to 30 meter stretch of kind of this free solo style crack where you had to ascend. And again, we have our packs on too. Thank God it wasn't wet. I have no idea how people do fucking Saddleback when it's raining. We just got lucky. And there's this ledge that's probably not more than a couple meters. So like if you are falling down at a fast pace, you easily could roll over the side of that ledge and just keep tumbling down the mountain. So I literally told my girlfriend, I said, don't stand directly under me because I don't want you to go down if I fall, but stand to the side of where I would fall. And if you see me rolling down, try to do anything you can to slow me down, like grab me, pull me, but do not go down with me. And that was a serious conversation, no exaggeration at all, with my girlfriend. I'm like, I might come tumbling down, and there's a chance I keep going if I'm not able to stop myself or grab onto something, because there's no holds. It's literally just smooth rock with a crack ascending up for 20 to 30 meters. And I looked her in the face and I'm freaking out. I'm also freaking out more than her. She's done crazy shit before. If I asked her, she might say this is the craziest thing she's done hiking. I don't know if she would say that. She's done more things than me, but this is definitely up there. And I was trying not to freak out for her too, because I could tell we were both kind of like freaking out. Like, are we going to need a helicopter out of here? Like, how the fuck do we even do this? And so I started climbing. I have the pack on my back. I'm in the fucking holds of the crack. And I told myself, you have to stop thinking now before I went. I legit felt like the fear of death was creeping up on me before I started climbing. And I told myself, like, whatever it is, it is. You're choosing to do this right now. Don't think, just however slow you have to go. No one's behind you. No one's pressuring you. Stop thinking and just do. And then eventually, when you keep putting one hand in front of the other, literally one foot in front of the other, eventually you will get to the top of this section. And that's what happened. But it was this weird soup of adrenaline and presence, because I was so afraid before I started climbing. I was thinking about, this is how news stories happen. This is how people get on the fucking cover of Newsweek as an Adirondack climber falls to his death. I was like, I'm a story right now. I don't want to be a story. And I kept thinking, like, oh my God, should we wait here for a helicopter? Should we wait for climbers with ropes? Like, what do we do? And, it was doable. I don't want to say it wasn't doable. It was like maybe doing a V1.5, like something between a V1 and a V2. But the thing is, if you fuck up, there's a chance that you die. So it's like, imagine you're bouldering indoors. You're doing like a V1 or a V2. Easy. You do that 100 times, you'll nail it, 99 of them. But imagine the one time you fuck up in an indoor bouldering place, and instead of a mat there's a small fucking rock ledge, and if you can't stop yourself on that rock ledge, if you fall, you're tumbling down the mountain, and you're probably dying. So like in my head, I was thinking that like the only reason we did it was because I know it was doable, but the fact that the cost of fucking this up was at least a broken leg, possibly death, was fucking with me. Like, I couldn't let go of, like, this could be my death right here. I've never felt that in my life. Like, I went skydiving before that, and I didn't even think that I would die from skydiving. I was like, the numbers are overblown. Like, sure, there's a possibility. Before I left the plane, like when we were going up on the way, I was really scared. But in my head, I wasn't thinking I'm gonna die. But in my head, thinking before I started climbing, I was thinking I'm gonna die. And then thank God, like, I don't know whether it was the meditation that helped me or whatever, but just like this adrenaline turned into presence, and I was able to just be there for, the minute and a half that I climbed up very slowly, this 20, 30 meter stretch, probably more than that, probably a few minutes, just going super slow. And then I got to the top, and my girlfriend did it probably quicker than me. And we're standing there, and then there's another stretch. We look up, I wasn't even looking ahead. I was waiting for my girlfriend to get up there. And there's another fucking stretch. Like, I just got super anxious thinking about it right now. But there's like literally a flat-faced cliff drop. And I can't even see a crack to go up. And I'm like, there's no way this is the trail. And we were following the white lines to get up there. And I see a white line on the face of the cliff. And I'm like, we need a fucking helicopter to get out of here. Like, I was freaking out at that point, but it's almost laughable. Like, I was almost laughing. I'm like, how the fuck does anyone do this? Like, I see people with dogs coming up here. Like, there must be another way. Like, this is a joke. I was like, this is a fucking, like, this is, someone's punking us right now. And as I'm saying that, as I'm standing with my girlfriend, another guy, a climber, he was going the opposite way. So he was going down the cliffs, down the Saddleback cliffs. And I don't know if it's easier going up or down. I can't imagine like sliding down that and trying to stop yourself. Maybe if you're faced the other way, it's a little easier because you're sliding on your butt as opposed to just like losing your grip and fucking like falling unprepared. But this guy said, he was like, yeah, I came the other side. I left a rope in, a spot. Like he said he left a rope there, and we were freaking out that like we didn't even really hear what he said. We were like, oh, whatever. He was going the other way. It can't help us. And then we're looking for any sort of passage. Like I went completely off to the right. I told my girlfriend, I was like, stay here. I'm gonna go check this out. Everything was cliffs in front of us, and then there's this little offshoot trail on the edge around the cliff. You couldn't just go up, but it was like wrapping around the cliffs, and there was a little dirt path that was safe enough to walk on, wide enough. And I came to a crevice, and I saw a rope hanging down, and I was like, oh my God, this is the rope that the guy was saying he left. We were just like freaking out too much to pay attention. And I pulled on the rope. I like dragged on it, tugged my full body weight, like pulling it down to the ground just to make sure it would stay. And it also had footholds in the rope. Like it had these little knots you could go up. So I went back and told my girlfriend, I said, look, we're not going up these cliffs. I'm dying. Like I'm dying doing this. I'm not good enough to do this. Maybe she's good enough to do it. I'm not. I'm getting a helicopter out of here or waiting. In my mind, I was thinking like, that's how I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to have to call someone or wait for someone who can help us get down or slide down, has a rope or whatever. Because we did pass some climbers in the area too. And so we go around, we see a rope. And by the way, like if you're listening to this and you've done Saddleback before and you're like, yeah, you went the wrong way, please leave a message in the comments, because that's what I was thinking too. I was like, there's no way. We were passing literal 6-year-olds, like, and people are saying this in the comments on all trails. Like, I did this with my fucking 6-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking, there's no fucking way, dude, that your daughter's scaling a wall like Spider-Man, also with a dog. Just like as a casual Saturday hike. People are commenting on the Saddleback Cliffs as if it's like they're going for a Saturday stroll. I'm like, did we miss the fucking trail? Like there has to be another route. And so please, like if you're like, yeah, you went the wrong way, there's another way, please let us know, because as far as I know, we went the right way. So we went through a trail that's like little kind of path, this stretch with the rope that I was talking about. So we went off to the side. It wraps around the cliffs. I tugged on the rope. I went up first, scared as fuck, because I'm thinking like, I'm in the air now. Like this is more than 20, 30 meters. I'm in the air now. If this rope that was put here by some random person we don't know just decides to break right now, I'm dead. And my girlfriend has no way to get out of here. And I went on the rope and it didn't break. And so I was like, okay. My girlfriend went up and I was like helping her a little bit get up, and I was like, all right, we got up. We both were standing, like we could see the top of the cliff, like where the trail was supposedly marked that we would have had to climb up, and we were even with it. So I was thinking, please God, let this be the summit. Like, please, no more cliffs after this, because we couldn't see anything. Like when we looked up, we were just seeing trees in the sky. So I'll remember this feeling the rest of my life, because I had so much adrenaline, so much fear. I was walking through this trail just far enough to see, is there another face, a rock face in front of us? And when I saw the mountain start to go down on the other side, I almost started crying. I was like, oh my fucking God, we're through it. And we were so fucking ecstatic, and it was just like a huge release of holy shit, we could have fucking like legitimately died. I don't know if anyone's ever died climbing that, but like, and again, I'm trying not to exaggerate. I'm telling you exactly what I felt. I'm telling you that I'm not an expert climber, nowhere near it. I'm telling you that when I hike with my friends who are, also in good shape, like we're all former athletes, like we played college baseball. A lot of them played pro baseball. Like we're guys in good shape. Like I don't know how we would have gotten through that. Like that was a ridiculous fucking climb that should have been like there should be some sort of sign before that. So like I'm legitimately not exaggerating when I say I was climbing something knowing that this could be my death. And then when we got to the summit and we kept walking and saw that it started to go down, and we were like, holy fuck, like there's no cliffs on the other side. It looks like an actual trail. I've never had that feeling in my life where like this fear of death dump, like the adrenaline from like the fear just instantly turned into grateful to be alive. Like I don't think I've ever been more grateful to be alive than in that moment. Not even from when I landed skydiving. That moment, I was so fucking happy just to be alive and nothing else mattered. Nothing else mattered. And I couldn't imagine what we would have done if that rope wasn't there. Like if that guy didn't pass us, and because I assume it was his rope. I don't know. He said something about the rope. Maybe it's just there. But if that wasn't there, I legitimately don't know how we would have gotten up. We would have had to wait for someone to help us or save us because I wasn't fucking. I looked at the cliffs and I was like, no shot. Like this is a joke. I was like trying to wake myself up. Like this is a fucking simulation. We're having a nightmare right now. I will say, the guy who passed us, he was an older man. Like you could just tell by the way he was carrying himself, the way he was dressed. He was unfazed. He was experienced. There's something off about people who are too outdoorsy. Like there was just this vibe from him. And again, we're freaking out, so like we're not thinking clearly. But I just got this vibe from this guy where he was so outdoorsy. He was so used to this. He was so like in the shit. And when you're too extreme in anything, like if you're too into NASCAR, you're too into fucking sewing clothes, like whatever it is, if you're like extremely into it, and you're talking to someone who's not, to the person who's not, there's something, it seems like something's off about this person. Like they're so fucking, like, why are they so, and this guy passed us and he was like, oh my God, like, yeah, you know, cliffs are crazy. Like, isn't it great? Like, and I was like, what? And he like almost looked through me. He's like, not like he was just talking to himself. Like he was like, this is fucking great, isn't it? Like I left a rope back there. Oh my God, it's such a clear day. I fucking loved it. And I was like, this guy's not even talking to me right now. He's just talking to himself. And he just went past us so quick, just disappeared down the cliffs. And I was like, oh my God, that guy's not even real. And he might not have been. I might have been hallucinating through fear. But yeah, there's like something off. Like he's like, yeah, dude, I've been living off the wind. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, dude, I've just been living off of nature's whisper, just taking in the calories. I haven't seen my family in 9 years. I almost said 90 years. I was like, that would make him dead. But yeah, it's just like this dude was so comfortable and so into it that he was just like in another universe to me. And he passed us and I was like, I don't think that guy exists. So yeah, that's the story of climbing Saddleback. That legitimately happened. Again, I'm remembering it as best as I can. And I know memory is not great when you try to recall stories, but I'm trying to do it without exaggeration. And again, if you look up Saddleback Cliffs, a lot of people are like, yeah, super doable, like not bad. Unless I am just so much less coordinated and less athletic, and like I was legitimately passing obese people on this trail going up the Saddleback Cliffs, people with dogs, people with children, like there's no way we went the same way. And if we did, then I'm retarded. Like there's either another way on Saddleback that we didn't go, or I've just built up such a delusion of my own physical capabilities. There's no in between. And either one is possible. I don't know. But let me know in the comments if you've ever done the Saddleback Cliffs. Hey guys, what's up? I took a break from recording to run some errands, and now I am back. It is night of the same day. So I ran some errands, did the sauna, and I have switched from coffee to whiskey. Some Elijah Craig. And that sounded so pretentious, just sipping a whiskey and saying, oh, what is Jack Daniels? Oh, I see what we have here. Some Jim Beam, I don't say. So I left off on the story of near death Saddleback, which I admit contains, inevitably some exaggeration as I'm recalling a memory, but I am really trying not to exaggerate what happened and based on my feelings. And we got through it. Me and my girlfriend got through it. I felt the biggest adrenaline dump and sigh of relief and gratefulness I've ever felt in my life up to that point and since. And I would not go back to Saddleback now and do that again, but I am grateful to have had that experience. I'm grateful to have gotten through it and did something challenging and going after something that scared me, which is what this section is about, life, going after something that scares you. And at the time, I didn't know that it was going to scare me. I didn't go into this backpacking trip thinking that I would be in a genuine fear of my life at some point. But I'm glad that I got through it. And I'm glad that we got through it. And I am grateful for now knowing that I possess what it takes to get through a situation like that and stay relatively level-headed, some freakouts here and there, but just being able to gather myself and execute when the stakes are high. Literally life or death. The next thing I want to get into, on this theme of life, going after what scares you, I had an interview with Mark Normand earlier in 2022. So right around a year ago. I think it was the end of January 2022. And I reached out to Mark Normand, and he's one of my comedy idols. He's hilarious. And the moment I sent him the first DM on Instagram, my heart dropped because I was like, oh shit, if he says yes, this is going to be big. This is going to be like the first, huge interview that I've had in terms of like followers and a dude that's been on Rogan and just has like this growing attention towards him. I've done big interviews in the past with other singers and people in the music industry, but Mark Normand, to me, it had the combination of I watch this guy, a couple times a week. I see his clips on YouTube. I've seen him live. And now he's kind of entered this whirlwind of this, comedic build on YouTube and social media. And if I nail this interview, if I do well in this interview, it's going to be big. At least for me, and it scared the shit out of me when he DM'd me back, and then we went back and forth. And I told him that my studio, is in my apartment, and he was like, "Oh, you're gonna kill me, comedy." And we kept going back and forth, and I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to, do it at my studio, and I know you're also recording at in the city for your own podcast." So we ended up meeting in Gotham Studios in Manhattan before a recording of We Might Be Drunk. And I was really nervous. When he sent me the address to meet him at Gotham Studios, I didn't even realize that it was a podcast studio at first, because in the messages, he sent me the address, and I didn't Google Maps it until the next day. And I knew where I had to be, so I packed all of my podcast gear. I packed my camera. I put it in a big, gray Samsonite suitcase, like an oversized luggage, everything. And I put it in Google Maps, and up came Gotham Podcast Studios. And I put two and two together, and I was like, oh, yeah, like, of course we're meeting at the studio, because I wasn't sure exactly where we were going to meet. I didn't know if this was going to be in his apartment or like whatever, but it's in Gotham Podcast Studios. But I'm already, I wheeled this suitcase down to the Uber already with all my podcast equipment. So I just brought it, and I walked in, and I checked in. I went up to the studio. They have a bunch of studios on the second or third floor, I think it is. And I'm wheeling this suitcase, and the girl who greets me, or the woman who greets me, is kind of like, "Hi, can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, sorry, I'm here to interview Mark Norman. I didn't realize that I was coming to meet him at a podcast studio, so I came prepared with all my stuff." And thankfully, the woman said, "Don't worry about it. Like, we'll set you up in the studio. You can record. We'll send you the file." So I was like, all right, sweet. I don't have to set up all this stuff. So like, that was a big relief. I could spend some more time just like chilling out, looking over some notes, questions I wanted to ask, and things like that. And Mark walked in, and we did the interview. And the first 5 minutes, kind of like any podcast, I was more nervous, and then gradually the nerves started to fade, and we got into a lot of shit. And he was hilarious as always. I was just trying not to get in the way, not trying to step on any jokes. And that was a huge carrier of the YouTube channel, especially in 2022 for AUXORO, because that ended up getting, I think it's 25,000 something views now. I had 300 subscribers, maybe 320 subscribers on YouTube at the time of recording that. Now I have well over 5,000. And there's been a lot of other interviews that have done well too, but Mark Norman that was like the breakout one where I was like, oh shit, like I'm getting like 1,000 views a day in the peak period of uploading that to YouTube. And it wouldn't have happened if I just didn't swallow that fear of sitting face to face with someone I idolize, sitting face to face with someone that's, big. And it really did a lot to quell my anxieties of, talking to someone that has more of a public reputation, a public persona. Because after 5 minutes, it's just like, it's a guy, it's two dudes talking to each other, or it's a guy and a girl talking to each other, whoever it is, any sort of celebritized persona melts away, and you're just talking to someone, and it ended up being an hour and a half conversation that flew by. Like, I literally looked down at 20 minutes, and then I looked down again at like an hour and 32 minutes, and I was like, holy shit, I said this was going to be done in an hour. And he, gratefully gave me 30 more minutes than we had agreed upon. He's a super cool dude, hilarious. I ended up giving him a bottle of Elijah Craig, funny enough, the same whiskey I'm drinking right now, because I was so anxious about wasting his time, because I'm a fan of Mark Norman. I listened to his podcast. I heard him mention I don't think he said an actual dollar amount, but he was on a podcast where someone like insinuated that he, or like his class of comedians, gets paid huge bucks on the weekend, which is true. He's a big comedian, and he's making, tens of thousands of dollars on a weekend, I'm sure, when he's doing 4, 5, 6 shows. And so in my mind, I thought, holy shit, like I'm taking up an hour, and it ended up being an hour and a half of Mark Norman's time. I need to make it worthwhile. So obviously I prepared as well as I could, as always. Even if it's someone who doesn't have a big following like Mark Norman, I still use the same level of preparation. But on top of that, because I was so worried about like walking out and him being like, well, that was a waste of time, I brought him a bottle of Elijah Craig whiskey. because I knew, one, that at least he would get a bottle of whiskey out of it, even if he thought it was a complete waste of time. And two, on his podcast with Sam Morrell, We Might Be Drunk, they make cocktails. So I knew it would be useful for that. So yeah, at the end of the podcast, he was kind of surprised as I shook his hand. I handed him a bottle of whiskey and he was like, "Oh, thanks." And yeah. Another funny note is the reason, or not the reason I reached out to Mark, but what gave me the confidence or what sparked Mark popping up in my head to reach out to, because I had been listening to him for years before I reached out to him. He was talking on a podcast about having trouble turning things down. And there was another comedian that was making fun of Mark for doing so many podcasts, which he does. He does an enormous amount of podcasts. And early on, one of the top comments on my YouTube video was, "Wow, Mark will really do anyone's podcast," which made me laugh. Because that's exactly what someone else was saying to make fun of Mark on a podcast, where they were like, "Yeah, you need to stop." Literally, this comedian told Mark, like, "You need to stop doing podcasts. You're doing so many podcasts that podcasters expect any comedian to just hop on a podcast because Mark Norman is huge and he's doing the podcast. So like, why aren't these other big comedians doing the podcast?" And he's like making other comedians look bad for turning down podcasts. And Mark said something along the lines of like, "I have trouble turning things down," or "I hate confrontation, and I have trouble saying no, so I end up doing a lot of podcasts and overextending my time." And maybe that's true. Maybe he was just being funny. Maybe he does have some insecurity there. But at the end of the day, I leveraged Mark Norman's own mental health and insecurities against him to get the podcast. And that's what it takes in this business. That's what it takes. You have to find the people that you want to interview, put a thumbtack on the name, make a list of people, have a vision board for podcast guests, and then you do research on their deepest fears and insecurities, and then you figure out, how do I leverage this against this person? That is truly the way. It is the best path. It is the most, it's not the most fulfilling path, but it's the path that I've chosen. Instead of, saying, let me just reach out to this person like a normal human being, I'm going to find out your deepest, darkest anxiety, and then I'm going to fling that back against you to get you to appear on the podcast. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm joking, but like I kind of heard him say that, and I was like, oh, well, he does a lot of podcasts. Also, maybe he'll have trouble turning me down. And he did, thankfully. So we did that, and that was great. And hopefully I'll talk to him again sometime soon. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of life and going after what scares you is Muay Thai. And my journey in Muay Thai. He's like, oh, he's talking about his journey in Muay Thai, his journey in self-defense. A lot of people talk about martial arts like ayahuasca, like they're like, oh my God, I did it. And like, it changes the way that I feel and I perceive the world around me. Like I've just become such a different person after like 2 doses of jujitsu. And I'm like, I don't feel that way about Muay Thai, but I was scared as fuck getting punched in the face or any sort of physical confrontation. Because I never really had... I've never punched someone in the face. I've never been punched in the face, kicked, whatever. I had some tussles in, college baseball, high school, but like nothing that was a legit fight. And to be clear, I started practicing Muay Thai back in 2020. Shout out Houston Ariaga, who was training with me when all the gyms were closed. He was nice enough to give me privates for a very generous price. So shout out to Houston. So to be clear, this is kind of a continuation from 2020 to now, and then I've joined a new gym in the city, the Workshop, which is great. I really enjoy my time there. But there's a like doing Muay Thai throughout 2022 has really like stepped up my willingness to walk around more confidently, if that makes sense, and more comfortably. Like I feel like I'm on edge less because I am more confident in how I carry myself and my confidence in my ability to handle a physical confrontation. You know, and if there is some sort of ayahuasca transformation of doing a martial art rather, like Muay Thai, you know, if you're going to get into the deeper level of it, I would say that the biggest change in myself, you know, I was doing it in 2020, 2021, continued, took a little bit of time off doing some traveling. 2022, I feel like I really made a leap in that second full year of Muay Thai. Not only in the technical aspects of it, but the way in which it literally changed how I walk around and how I do things, not only physically, but just even conversationally and podcasts and talking to people. Like there's something that changes you, like the fear that someone's going to hit you. And it rarely happens, but like before I ever went to a Muay Thai class, I feel like I had a certain hardness about me that I carried with me, and I would want to project that more onto the world. So if you met me before, 2020, if you met me back in college, I probably was walking more with like my arms wider and trying to look broader, bigger than I am when I walk, because I wanted to project this persona of don't fuck with me. I'm bigger than you. Don't even fucking try it, because I didn't want it to actually come to blows because I had zero confidence in myself if it actually did. And now, and again, I'm speaking as I'm still a Muay Thai baby. I've been doing this for, really like a year and a half consistently, but spread out over the course of 2.5 years. So I'm not talking from a level of expertise, not even, close to that by any means. But I do feel like going through that second full year that there was a gradual shift in you don't have to walk around like you're the fucking man, because if something did happen, you have the ability to diffuse that and not resort to violence in most situations. So it's something else that people don't talk about, is like, just because you could end an altercation physically doesn't mean that you should. And because I've seen what can happen in videos, just like one punch, you have no idea what's happening, a street fight, just all the variations, and having seen one or two actually transpire in public, I know how quickly that shit can go haywire, and it can literally result in your life being lost. In some situations, there are people that die with one punch. There's an entire documentary dedicated to people that have been killed off of one punch because they slip or their head bounces off the pavement, hits off a fire hydrant, whatever. They're dead. So because of Muay Thai, and because of like being exposed to violence in a controlled and, loving, gracious setting, and seeing violence in those doses, I'm aware that I don't want it to exceed to a level that is outside of the gym. I don't want to experience that in a non-controlled setting because of how violent it can be inside the gym in a controlled setting. Like I couldn't imagine, being fucking gang punched 5-on-1 with no referee. You're on concrete. There's, you know, one dude comes at me, 4 of his friends show up. Like maybe I get out of one situation, like one person, but then the 4 others kind of gang like there's no way to anticipate that. So like I've put much more emphasis on trying to diffuse things before it could ever get to a physical altercation. That has been nailed into my mind over the past year. That's like a roundabout long way of what I'm trying to say, is that I am much more willing and I am my number one concern in any sort of altercation would be, number one, verbally diffuse, 2, run, get the fuck out of there, or 3, if you have no other option, then you engage physically. And if it does come to that third option where I'd be pushed to engage physically, I do have confidence with most people because of the things that Muay Thai has instilled in me, in the fundamentals. And just like the average person gets really freaked out, and I was this way. I like, just like a punch to the face, not even hard, or like a body punch, like you want to like turtle shell up and kind of just like completely close off. Like you freak out, you turn away, like maybe you like push out at the other person and you totally expose yourself, like your face, your body. You don't cover up, you don't learn how to eat punches, eat kicks, like stay composed in the pocket. And drilling and sparring teaches you a lot in that sense, where you get comfortable taking some hits and learning how to stay in the pocket and handle yourself. And in, this year, something that I want to do more of is the drilling and sparring aspect, because I haven't been sparring as much because I just haven't had the skills to where I feel like it would have been beneficial for me to spar. And now that I've acquired some of those skills in 2023, my goal is to be someone who can spar, I don't know, once a month or once every couple months, just to like put myself in there and see what happens. So it's been a really good experience. And I was scared of as shit when I first started doing Muay Thai back in 2020. And I've continued to, throw myself in the ring, so to speak, even though it's a gym, it's not a ring, and work on the fundamentals. Something that I absolutely hate about Muay Thai, something I absolutely hate, I hate shadow boxing. I know it's a very important part of Muay Thai. I just can't get myself to shadow box. So what I love to do between classes, this is something that's been, suggested by a lot of the Muay Thai masters, a lot of great minds in martial arts. Instead of shadow boxing, something I like to do in between classes is fight homeless people on the subway. There was this guy who was shadow boxing. He was walking past me. He was shadow boxing on the platform. And he was throwing punches and kicks, and he turned around at me and he went towards me like this. He said, like, come on. And I was like, okay. So I got in my stance, and I hit him with a jab, cross, hook, rear kick. He checked the rear kick, came back with a head kick. I blocked that. And then we kept going. We kept going and going and going. And it was like this dance. People were crowding around us on the subway platform. They were like, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him. And I didn't know who they were saying kill to. I had no idea. I had no idea who the people were referring to. Did they want the homeless guy to kill me? Did they want me to kill the homeless guy? And we ended up, we went 2 rounds. We stopped. We had someone come in the middle with an iPhone. They used an iPhone timer, used a referee, and it ended up, being a draw. It ended up being a draw. And I looked at the guy because I never got a good look at his face the whole time. And I walked up to him real close, and I still couldn't see it. It was out of focus. And I was like, I didn't take any shots to the head. What happened? And as I walked close to him, it focused in, and his face was mine. I realized I was fighting me the entire time. That's all I was ever doing. I was just fighting myself. And that's what life is. And that story was complete bullshit. None of that other stuff happened throughout the length of this podcast. That just did not happen. Do not shadowbox. Do not fight people on subways in place of shadowboxing. So thank you so much, guys, for listening to this podcast. Just to recap, the 3 overarching themes or lessons, whatever you want to call it, from 2022. The creativity lesson for me was there is no formula. The love lesson was show up for your friends and loved ones. And the life lesson for me was go after what scares you. And yeah, I think to wrap this up, a big reason why I love doing podcasting and why I feel drawn to it is because social interaction and communication has scared me so much since I've been a kid. I have deep memories of being afraid to even raise my hand in class as a young adult. I'm not talking about 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years. I'm talking about a 20-year-old kid in college. I started podcasting when I was 24. I'm 29 now. I went through an entire semester. In school where I raised my hand once. The first day of class, I got called on and I gave what I felt like was a dumb fucking answer. I was so sure of myself, and the teacher was I guess, but not really. And my heart just dropped. My cheeks just started getting beet red, and I didn't raise my hand the entire rest of the semester. The entire rest of the semester did not raise my hand. It's fucking that's fucking 16 weeks. And I dreaded that class, and I knew participation. He wrote on the syllabus, participation was 30% of our grade because it was a group class. And I just wore a fucking C or B minus, whatever I got. Did well on all the tests, but just never raised my hand. And I was so afraid to just fucking speak my mind and say things because I felt like I had gotten shut down. And in the eyes of everyone else in the class, in the eyes of the teacher, that was probably just a normal answer and wasn't a big deal. But to me, it was such a fucking big deal. So don't let life stop you from raising your hand for what the fuck you want to do, whatever it is. Podcasting, singing, writing. Raise your fucking hand and raise it over and over and over and over again, especially when you feel awkward as fuck, because those are the most important times to raise your hand. And I don't want to turn this into a fucking TED Talk or whatever. But yeah, just talking about the shit that scares me. I do have a deep-seated fear of conversation, and I feel like that's why I'm consistently drawn to it and why it fascinates me, because I've had that fear for so long. And people come up to me and they're like, hey, I enjoyed this conversation. It seems like you love talking to people. And a lot of times I'm I get very scared of it. I love it now, but there was a time where it was terrifying. And I have different fears now, and I guess that's the never-ending process, is that when you confront a fear, your fears don't go away. There's just the next one leapfrogs it and takes its place, and now you have a new number one fear. So yeah, I I guess this is the longest rant monologue I've done to this point. You know, I hope it's been helpful. I hope you've been able to take something from it. Some of you probably think some of the shit is dumb. Hopefully some of you find some value in it. This is just me. This is what I've been feeling. I sat down for a really long time, for a while, and thought about, what did I learn last year? What are the things that really affected me? And these are those things, with creativity, with love, and with life. So thank you so much for listening. I love you guys. If you do want bonus episodes, you can go to auxoro.supercast.com to sign up for Auxoro Premium. $5 a month. You get bonus episodes, mini-sodes. You get to ask guests questions, submit questions to me that you want to ask the guests, and I will consider them for the show. Also, you can submit topics for me to rant on the AUXORO Podcast. So if you want to check that out, go check it out. Also, if you feel like you don't want to do that, I completely understand. $5 a month is a lot. I would just ask that you go to Apple and Spotify and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us appear higher in searches. So when people search things that are related to the podcast, like if someone searched Saddleback and we have more ratings, this podcast will pop up higher because of that. So it really does help. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you.